My father called me a lowlife. My mother called me uneducated trash. Then they kicked me out of the family business I'd spent 11 years helping build. They thought they had all the power. They thought I needed them. What happened next proved just how wrong they were. If you've ever been the one who worked the hardest in your family and got thanked the least, stay with me to the end of this story, because what happened over the next 2 years still feels unbelievable, even to me. And if stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe right now because you don't want to miss how this one ends. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 30 years old now, but this story starts when I was 19, fresh out of high school, in a small town called Maple Ridge, Ohio. My family owned a hardware store called Carter's Hardware, the kind of place with creaky wood floors and a bell on the door, started by my grandfather back in the 70s. By the time I came along, it was being run by my father, Richard Carter, and my mother Diane helped with the books on paper, which mostly meant she lost things. I have one sibling, my younger brother Connor, 2 years behind me in school. Growing up, Connor was the golden child, and I don't say that bitterly. I say it because it was a fact everyone in town could see. He got new cleats every season. I got my older cousin's hand-me-downs and a be grateful lecture if I complained. When the 2008 recession hit, the store nearly folded. I was 17, and I remember my dad sitting at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, staring at past due notices. I didn't think twice. I told him I'd skip the college fund my grandmother had set aside for me and work the front counter instead, full-time, the second I graduated. My parents agreed so fast it almost hurt. They didn't even pretend to argue with me about it. Meanwhile, Connor was told from day one that he was going to college, no discussion, no sacrifice required from him. I didn't resent him for it back then. I actually believed I was doing something noble, saving the family business, keeping our roots alive. I taught myself bookkeeping from library books because nobody else in that store could read a balance sheet. I learned how to manage vendor accounts, payroll, taxes, inventory systems, all of it by trial, error, and late nights with a calculator and a cup of cold coffee. Within 3 years, I had basically become the operations manager of Carter's Hardware, except nobody called it that. On paper, I was just Emily, Dad's daughter who helps out. I was paid $200 a week, in cash, no taxes withheld, no benefits, nothing. When I asked once, gently, if I could get an actual paycheck and a real title, my father laughed. "Why would you need that?" he said. "Your family. Family doesn't need a contract." I told myself that was just how small family businesses worked. I told myself it would be worth it someday. Connor went off to State University to study business, and every dinner conversation for 4 years revolved around him. What classes he was taking, what internship he was applying for, how proud they were of their future business owner. Meanwhile, I was the one keeping that business owner's company from going bankrupt. And nobody mentioned my name once at those dinners unless it was to ask why I hadn't refilled the bird feeder. I wanted their approval more than anything in the world, so I kept my head down and kept working. When Connor graduated, the whole town threw him practically a parade. My parents rented out the community hall for his graduation party. I baked the cake myself because the bakery was too expensive that month, after I'd just covered an unexpected vendor payment out of my own pocket so the store wouldn't get a late fee. Connor came home that summer with a diploma, a new car my parents co-signed for, and a brand new title waiting for him, General Manager of Carter's Hardware. I remember the day my father announced it at the store, gathering the 3 part-time employees together like it was a corporate press release. "My son has a real business degree," he said, beaming. "He's going to take this place to the next level." I stood behind the counter, ringing up a customer's paint cans, and I just smiled because what else was I supposed to do? Connor's idea of taking it to the next level was redesigning the store logo and ordering a neon sign that cost $4,000 we didn't have. He started showing up at noon, leaving by 4, and calling every decision he made strategic. I was the one still opening at 7, closing at 9, doing payroll, restocking, and now also training him on systems I had built from scratch. And here's the part that really started to eat at me. Whenever a customer or a vendor asked Connor a question he didn't know the answer to, he'd turn to me and say, "Emily will get that figured out," like I was his assistant instead of the person who had. built the entire operational backbone of the store. At family dinners, my father started a new habit. He'd ask Connor about market trends and business strategy. And Connor would ramble using textbook words like scalability and brand positioning, and my parents would nod like he was reciting scripture. Then, almost as a joke, my father would turn to me and say, "And how's the cash register treating you, Emily?" Like that was the extent of what I did. It stung every single time, but I swallowed it because I still believed, somewhere deep down, that hard work eventually gets recognized. Around that time, I started feeling like I needed something that was mine, something nobody could take credit for or hand to my brother instead. I found an online program for a CPA certification track, accounting courses I could take at night after closing the store. I didn't tell anyone at first. I'd come home, eat something quick, and study at the kitchen table until 1 in the morning, then be back at the store by 7. When my mother finally found my course materials on the counter, she picked them up like they were something dirty. "What is this?" she asked. "Accounting classes," I said. "I want to get certified." She actually laughed. "Emily, you didn't even go to college. You think some online class is going to make you a real accountant? People go to school for years for that," she said. "You'll just waste money and time." I told her I was doing it on my own dime, that it wouldn't cost the family anything. She shrugged and walked away. That was the first time I heard the phrase that would later define everything. At dinner that same week, my father brought it up, like he found it funny. "Diane tells me you're trying to be an accountant now," he said, smirking at Connor like they shared an inside joke. "That's cute, Emily, but you know real businesses hire people with actual degrees, right? Connor here has a degree from a real university. You've got a GED and a calculator. I didn't have a GED. I had graduated high school with honors, but facts never seemed to matter much in that house once my father had a punchline going. Connor laughed along, of course. He always laughed along. I went quiet, finished my plate, and went back to studying that night with my jaw clenched, so tight it ached. I kept going anyway. Quietly, stubbornly, I kept showing up to the store every single morning, and I kept showing up to my own future every single night. 2 years passed like that, me working full-time, unpaid in any meaningful legal sense, studying for my CPA exams in the cracks of my schedule, and watching Connor make increasingly reckless decisions with money that wasn't his. He started ordering excess inventory because a supplier took him out to a nice lunch. He skipped vendor payments because he forgot, which meant I had to scramble to avoid late fees and damaged relationships. He started taking long lunches with friends from college, putting the meals on the store's business card, calling it networking. I flagged these issues to my father more than once. "Dad, we can't keep absorbing these costs," I told him one evening, showing him the actual numbers. Numbers I had pulled together myself because nobody else even knew where the financial records were kept. He waved me off. "Connor's got a vision, Emily. You wouldn't understand it. You never went to business school." That sentence became a wall I kept running into, over and over, no matter what I brought to the table. My grandmother, Ruth, was the one person in that family who saw me clearly. She used to slip me $20 sometimes when she visited and tell me, "You're the smartest one in this whole family, sweetheart. Don't you ever forget that." She watched me grow up working myself to exhaustion while my brother coasted, and she never once said a cruel word to me. When she passed away 2 winters ago, it broke something in me that I hadn't expected. At her funeral, my father gave a speech about legacy and family values. The same father who had spent years telling me my work didn't matter because I lacked a piece of paper. A few weeks after the funeral, my parents called a family meeting to discuss her will and the future of the business. I actually felt a flicker of hope walking into that meeting, naive as that sounds now. I thought maybe, finally, after everything, there would be some kind of acknowledgement. My father sat at the head of the table with a folder of paperwork. "Your grandmother left some money to each of you," he said. "But more importantly, we've decided it's time to formalize ownership of the store." He looked at Connor. "Connor is going to be made full legal co-owner, alongside myself, effective this year. He's earned it with his degree and his vision for this place." I sat there waiting for my name to come up. It never did. "What about me?" I finally asked. "I've worked here for 11 years. I built the systems this store runs on. I haven't even been paid a real wage this whole time. My father's expression hardened. You're not an owner, Emily. You're an employee, an unlicensed one with no formal training. Connor has a degree. You don't. That's just how it works in the real world. My mother chimed in, arms crossed, the same posture she always used when she was about to say something designed to cut deep. You should be grateful we even let you work here all these years, she said. Most places wouldn't hire someone without a real education. I felt my whole chest go cold. I'm getting my CPA license, I said quietly. I'm almost done with the program, my father scoffed. An online program isn't a real degree, Emily. Stop embarrassing yourself. That night I went home and I genuinely cried for the first time in years. Not because of the ownership decision itself, but because in that moment I understood, with total clarity, that no amount of sacrifice was ever going to earn me their respect. I wasn't being undervalued by accident. I was being undervalued on purpose, because keeping me small kept me useful to them. A few weeks later, the final blow came. I had started asking for documentation, pay stubs, anything official, because I needed proof of employment history for my CPA licensing requirements. My father exploded the moment I brought it up at the store, in front of 2 customers and a delivery driver. Why do you need paperwork? He snapped. You've never needed it before. Because I'm applying for my license. Dad, I need verifiable work history. You think some online certificate is going to make you somebody? He yelled. You are not somebody. You're an uneducated lowlife trying to play accountant. My mother stepped in, not to calm him down, but to add fuel. We've carried you for years, Emily. The least you could do is stop causing problems. Carried me, I said, my voice shaking now. I haven't had a real paycheck in 11 years. I built this store's entire system. Get out, my father said, pointing at the door. If you're going to act like this is some corporate office that owes you something, get out. Get out, you lowlife. Get out, you lowlife. I stood there for a moment, completely numb, while a customer near the paint aisle quietly pretended to read a label. I picked up my bag, walked past my brother, who said absolutely nothing in my defense, and I walked out the front door of the store I had practically rebuilt with my own 2 hands, for the very last time. I sat in my car in the parking lot for almost an hour, shaking, crying, feeling 11 years of unpaid labor and quiet humiliation crash down on me all at once. I had no savings to speak of, because every spare dollar I'd ever made had either gone back into the store or into my own education. I called my friend Vanessa, who I'd known since high school, and she told me to come stay with her without even hesitating. That night, lying on Vanessa's pull-out couch, staring at the ceiling, I made myself a promise. I was not going to scream, I was not going to beg, and I was absolutely not going to throw a single punch, literal or figurative. I was going to get my license, build a life that owed them nothing, and let the truth do whatever damage it was going to do, on its own, in its own time, completely within the law. The next few months were some of the hardest of my life. I worked a temp job answering phones for a logistics company during the day and finished my CPA coursework at night. I passed my final exam section 8 months after my father threw me out. On a Tuesday afternoon, alone in Vanessa's tiny apartment, staring at the screen that said, "Congratulations, you have passed." I cried again that day, but it felt completely different from the night I got kicked out. It felt like relief, like proof, like the first real evidence that everything I'd built inside myself actually meant something outside of that store. I sent out applications to every accounting firm within an hour of Maple Ridge. Most didn't even respond. One did. A mid-sized firm called Walsh and Hendricks, run by a sharp, no-nonsense man named Daniel Walsh, who had built his reputation doing forensic audits for small and mid-sized businesses across 3 counties. In my interview, he asked me how someone with no traditional college background had managed to build real-world bookkeeping experience strong enough to pass the CPA exam on the first attempt. I told him the truth. I told him about the store, about running an entire small business's finances for 11 years without a title, about studying at kitchen tables at 1 in the morning. He leaned back in his chair and said something I will never forget. "Emily, a degree tells me you can sit in a classroom. What you just described tells me you can actually run a business under pressure. I'll take the second one every time." He hired me on the spot as a junior associate. I started at the bottom technically, but I worked like my life depended on it, because in a lot of ways it did. Within a year, I had built a reputation at the firm for catching discrepancies other people missed, because I had years of real instinct for where small businesses hide their cracks. Mr. Walsh started giving me more responsibility, more clients, more trust. I want to be honest with you. During all of this, I never once plotted some grand scheme to destroy my family, and I genuinely tried to move forward. I avoided Maple Ridge gossip. I didn't check up on the store. I didn't even follow Connor on social media anymore. But small towns have a way of bringing things back around to you whether you want them to or not. About a year and a half after I left, Mr. Walsh called me into his office with a new case file. "We've got a referral from First Heritage Bank," he said. "Local hardware store applying for a refinancing loan and a credit line extension. Bank wants an independent forensic review before they approve anything, since the numbers the owner submitted don't add up cleanly." He slid the folder across the desk. The name on the file was Carter's Hardware. My stomach dropped the second I saw it. I told him immediately, full transparency, that this was my family's business, that I had worked there for 11 years and that I had been let go under difficult personal circumstances. I told him I would fully understand if he wanted to assign someone else to maintain objectivity. Mr. Walsh thought about it for a long moment. "Emily, I trust your integrity more than almost anyone else on my team," he said. "If you can commit to following the numbers wherever they lead, regardless of what that means for your family, I want you on this. If you can't promise me that, tell me now and I'll hand it off, no judgment." I told him I could do it, and I meant it. This wasn't going to be about revenge. This was going to be about the truth, finally with real authority behind it. I spent the next 3 weeks going through Carter's Hardware's books. Bank statements, invoices, vendor contracts, and payroll records, the same systems I had built years earlier. Except now I was looking at them as a licensed professional with full legal access granted by the bank's audit request. What I found was worse than I expected. Connor had been running the store into the ground in ways that went far beyond simple bad decisions. There were multiple instances of inventory purchases logged at inflated prices, with the price difference routed to a personal account linked to a vendor that, it turned out, was actually owned by one of Connor's college friends. There were repeated consulting fees paid out to a shell business that did absolutely no traceable work for the store. Money that conveniently ended up funding Connor's new truck and a series of vacations he'd posted about online. Payroll records showed Connor paying himself a salary nearly triple what the store's actual revenue could sustain, while real operational debts piled up unpaid. My father, meanwhile, had signed off on most of these transactions without reviewing a single supporting document, because he trusted Connor's vision completely. The store was, in plain terms, on the edge of collapse, propped up by loans my father had no real ability to repay under the current numbers. I documented every single discrepancy with full supporting evidence, exactly as the law and my professional code required. No exaggeration, no personal commentary, just facts, dates, and figures. I submitted my findings to Mr. Walsh, who reviewed every page himself before we finalized the report for the bank. The report went to First Heritage Bank, recommending against the loan extension until a full independent forensic audit was completed and the discrepancies were formally addressed, with several flagged transactions meeting the threshold for mandatory reporting under financial fraud regulations. I want to pause here and say clearly, I never once altered a number, never exaggerated a finding, never used my position to settle a personal score. I simply did my job correctly, the way I had trained for years to do it. The bank denied the loan extension within 2 weeks. Without that refinancing, Carter's Hardware could not cover its existing debt obligations. And the bank, per standard procedure, initiated a separate compliance review given the size of the irregular transactions. I heard through Vanessa, who still had family in Maple Ridge, that the store was suddenly the talk of the town, that there were rumors about money problems and some kind of audit. About 3 weeks after the bank's decision, I got a call from a Maple Ridge area code I almost didn't answer. It was my mother. Her voice was shaky in a way I had genuinely never heard before. "Emily, the bank is saying there's some kind of investigation into the store," she said. "They mentioned a firm called Walsh and Hendricks did the review. Do you know anything about that?" I took a breath. "Mom, I work at Walsh and Hendricks. I was assigned to that case. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. You did this? She finally said, her voice cracking somewhere between disbelief and accusation. I followed the evidence, Mom. I documented what was actually in the books. I didn't put anything there that wasn't already true. How could you do this to your own family? She asked. I felt something steady settle inside me, something that had been shaking for years finally holding still. I didn't do anything to this family, I said. Connor did, when he funneled money to a friend's shell company and paid himself triple what the business could afford. Dad did, when he signed off on things without checking a single document. I just told the truth, professionally, the same way I've been trained to do for the past 2 years, the training you both told me would never amount to anything. She didn't have a response for that. A few days later, my father called. He didn't apologize, not at first, that wasn't his style. He tried to demand that I fix it, that I use my position to make the bank reconsider, as if my entire profession was just a personal favor system I could bend on command. Dad, I can't do that, I told him. It would be illegal, and frankly, I wouldn't do it even if it wasn't, because everything in that report is true. You need to talk to a real lawyer and a real forensic accountant about your options going forward. After everything we did for you, he said, his voice rising, the same tone he used the day he threw me out. We gave you a job for 11 years, and this is how you repay us. You didn't give me a job, Dad, I said, calmer than I expected myself to be. I built that job with my own hands for almost no pay, no benefits, and no title. For 11 years, and the day I asked for basic documentation of that work, you called me an uneducated lowlife and threw me out of the building. I'm not the one who needs to apologize here. He hung up on me. That should have felt like a victory, and in a strange way it did, but mostly it felt sad. The kind of sad that comes from finally seeing clearly something you spent years refusing to see. Around that same time, separately and completely on my own initiative, I had also filed a wage claim with the Ohio Department of Commerce's Wage and Hour Division, using my own personal copies of years of work logs. Schedules and bank deposit records I had quietly kept on my own computer for my own peace of mind, never imagining I'd actually need them as legal evidence. Because I had been functioning as a full-time, non-family rate employee performing manager-level duties without proper wage documentation, tax withholding, or minimum wage compliance for over a decade, the claim had real legal teeth. This wasn't about punishing my parents out of spite. It was about formally, legally recognizing 11 years of real, documented labor that had been dismissed, mocked, and finally erased the day I was thrown out without a single dollar of severance or acknowledgement. The investigation took several months. During that time, Carter's Hardware's situation continued to unravel on its own, completely separate from anything I was doing. The compliance review the bank had triggered escalated, and Connor was formally confronted with the evidence of the shell company payments and the inflated invoices. Vanessa told me later that he tried to claim it was all strategic vendor partnerships. But the paper trail told a very different story, one that didn't require my testimony at all, because it was simply sitting there in black and white. My father facing mounting debt, an active compliance review, and a son who had quietly drained the business he'd handed him on a silver platter, was forced to put the store up for sale just to settle outstanding obligations and avoid further legal exposure. Carter's Hardware, the store my grandfather built, the store I had given 11 years of my life to, closed its doors for good on a gray Tuesday morning, after 52 years in that same building. I didn't go watch it close. I heard about it from Vanessa, who sent me a single photo of the closed sign taped to the front door, the same door I had walked out of with my head down and my chest tight over a year before. I sat with that photo for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of grief and something close to peace, because that store had also been the place where I learned everything I now knew how to do, even if the people who ran it never gave me credit for it. A few weeks after the store closed, my wage claim was resolved. The state determined, based on documented work history, hours and responsibilities, that I had indeed been misclassified and underpaid for years, and my parents were ordered to pay a settlement covering a portion of the back wages owed, calculated against state minimum wage and overtime standards for the documented period within the statute of limitations. It wasn't an amount that made me rich, but it was real, it was legal, and it was, more than anything, an official record stating in plain terms that my work had value that had been deliberately denied to me for over a decade. I used a portion of that settlement, combined with savings from my growing salary at Walsh and Hendricks, to do something I had quietly dreamed about since the night I passed my CPA exam alone in Vanessa's apartment. I opened my own small accounting practice. I named it Carter Financial Solutions, not as a jab at my family, but because Carter is my name too, and I had earned every right to it on my own terms. Mr. Walsh, generous as ever, became my first client referral source, sending small business owners my way who needed honest, careful bookkeeping, the exact kind of work nobody in my family had ever respected me for doing. Within a year, my practice had built a reputation in the county for being thorough, fair, and impossible to fool. Which, looking back, makes a strange kind of sense, doesn't it? I had spent 11 years learning exactly how easy it is for small businesses to quietly come apart at the seams when nobody is paying close enough attention. About 8 months after the store closed, I got an email out of nowhere from Connor. No apology in the subject line, just, "Can we talk?" I almost didn't respond, but curiosity and maybe some small leftover hope got the better of me. We met at a coffee shop in a town between Maple Ridge and where I now lived, neutral ground. He looked different, thinner, more tired, none of the easy confidence he used to carry around like a birthright. "Mom and Dad are struggling," he said, not quite making eye contact. "The settlement, the store closing, it wiped out almost everything. They're renting a small place now." I waited, because I could tell there was more coming. "I know I messed up," he finally said. "The vendor thing, the consulting fees, that was stupid and it was wrong, and I know it. I'm not asking you to fix it. I just wanted to say, you were always better at this than me. I knew it back then too, I just never said it. It wasn't a full apology for everything. Not for the years of silence while our parents tore me down in front of him. Not for never once standing up for me at that counter, but it was something, and I let myself accept it as the small, honest piece of truth that it was. I'm not going to pretend the last few years didn't happen," I told him. "But I'm not interested in destroying anyone either. If you actually want to learn how to manage money the right way, I can point you toward some real resources. I'm not going to do it for you, though." "Not again." He nodded, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, he actually looked like he meant it when he said thank you. My relationship with my parents has been slower to rebuild, and I've had to make peace with that. My mother called me a few months after that coffee meeting with Connor, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. She didn't apologize outright, but she asked questions she had never once asked me before. "How did you learn all of this?" she asked, almost like she genuinely wanted to know. "How did you build all this on your own?" "The same way I built everything else you and Dad never noticed," I told her, gently, because I didn't need to be cruel to be honest. One late night at a time by myself because nobody else believed I could. We talk occasionally now. Careful, measured conversations, nothing like the easy family dinners other people describe. But it's something, and for the first time, those conversations happen with me as an equal, not as the uneducated daughter who should be grateful for scraps. My father and I have spoken exactly twice since that phone call where he tried to get me to bury the audit findings. The first time he asked, almost begrudgingly, if I could take a look at some paperwork for a small side job he'd picked up. I told him I'd be happy to refer him to a colleague at a fair, standard consulting rate, the same rate I'd charge any other client. He went quiet for a moment, then said, "Right. Of course." I think that was the moment it finally landed for him fully, that I was never going to be free labor again for him or for anyone. The second time, just a few months ago, he called on my birthday, something he had genuinely never done before in 30 years, not once. "Happy birthday, Emily," he said, his voice oddly formal, almost shy. "I've been thinking. You built something real. I should have seen that sooner. I let myself feel that, fully, without rushing to forgive everything in one breath, because healing, I've learned, doesn't work on anyone else's deadline but your own." "Thank you for saying that," I told him. "It means something. And it did, even if it came years later than it should have." Today, Carter Financial Solutions has 4 employees, a small office on the main street of the town I now call home, and a client list full of small business owners who finally have someone in their corner who understands what it's like to build something from nothing. I named a small scholarship fund through the local community college after my grandmother, Ruth Carter, specifically for students pursuing accounting or finance certifications without a traditional 4-year degree, because somebody believed in me when an actual sheet of paper said I wasn't qualified to believe in myself, and I wanted to be that person for somebody else. Sometimes, late at night, closing up my own office, locking my own front door, I think back to standing in that hardware store parking lot, shaking, holding a bag of clothes, with my father's voice still ringing in my ears. "Get out, you lowlife," he'd said. For years, I let that sentence define how small I believed I was allowed to be. Now, I understand it as the exact moment my real life actually started. The moment I stopped waiting for permission from people who were never going to give it freely, and started building proof of my own worth instead, page by page, number by number, year by year. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Nobody gets to decide your value by handing you a label, whether that's uneducated, ungrateful, or a life. Real worth is proven in the quiet hours nobody applauds, in the work you keep doing even when the people who should support you the most are busy underestimating you. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud, isn't cruel, and doesn't even feel like revenge while you're living it. Sometimes it's just becoming so undeniably capable, so thoroughly documented, and so completely independent, that the truth itself does all the work for you, exactly the way it should. Thank you for staying until the end of my story. If it moved you even a little, please consider subscribing, because there are more stories like this one still to come. And every single one of them is about the same simple truth. Your worth was never up for someone else's debate.